let's get it. So today we're going to build on what we did last week. Last week was just talking about the really basic introductory concepts of light. And I'm going to take that and start showing you how to use it on actual shapes and characters. So let's do a little refresher before we dive into it, because light's kind of strange. The basics of light and lighting is light. So let's start with a light source. We'll just use a light bulb. No, let's use the sun, right? Big sun. So we have all these light, right? The basics, what we covered last week, was you have surfaces of different degrees that dictate how much light they catch relative to the rays, right? So the rays are coming down, boop, 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 boop. And then based on the angle that that ray of light hits that surface, you will change how strong the lighting is. So this one right here, because it's perpendicular, going to get that 10. Make that a little darker so you can... Right. That's better. There we go. Right. This one here might get a 3, 7. This one here feels maybe like 4, and this one probably a 1. Right? That all still makes sense. Let me just drop that little scale in for you. So I want to make sure this is all nice and primed in your head while we dive into this, right? 9. And make sure you got this all nice and fresh. Otherwise, this lesson's going to kick you. So there's your 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And these are just percentages of the opacity, right? This one was here just 100%, and then I just scaled down to 0%, right? So this here is the basics of how light works. Now, there is a sort of if, and, or but to that I want to have in your brains as we dive into further complications of light, because light's not simple. That's why you're here. So the sun is a really big light source because it's a star, right? They're kind of big. If you have a small light source like a light bulb, what's happening is the light isn't doing this. It radiates from the light source, right? So you get this kind of thing where it's got a fixed point and we can see where the light's coming from. And so now something stupid's going to happen. If we have these surfaces, like say like this, right? Say we have 3 surfaces here. We're going to actually see the light do this when it casts the shadow, right? So you go from this the light source and you want to draw it out like this. And so now we know that this area here, this part of this object will have shade. This part of this object will have shade, right? You're not going to get this straight back effect like this. If it's the sun, you would have it like this, right? But because there's a smaller, less powerful light source, we see this kind of diagonal effect to how the shadow is cast. Is that all making sense so far? Y'all with me? Can I get some nodding wherever you are in the world, or just someone say yes, right? We're getting some like, oh, okay. All right, so that's the big one I want in your heads, is that the strength and size of the light source will dictate the angle of the shade, right? Sun's really big, so it's just kind of straight lined. Like a light bulb, much smaller, and so you get these diagonal effects, right? Now, if you're paying attention to light outside, sometimes you have cloudy days where the sun's not just going nuts. What happens? Well, you get this same kind of effect is over here, but it's much lighter, right? It's kind of diffused, and the shade, like the strength of the light dictates how strong the shade is. So if this light's coming in at a friggin' 10, that shade's going to be very dark behind your object, right? You're going to get like a lot of shade behind your objects. But if that light is coming in at maybe like, 5 or something, your shade's going to be a lot less aggressive. And that's sort of the general principles of cast shadow, right? Feeling good about our surfaces. We're feeling good about our cast shadow, radiation, because then we're going to dive into some actual shapes. I want to make sure people are feeling good. You feeling good? Huh? Feel me? I can feel your nod, Osaka. I feel it. Okay, cool. Good. So, we dive into some actual shapes here. Let's do, I don't know, pink's a great color. Pink's an underrated color. Right, so let's just draw some shapes. Give me a second while I draw some nice pretty shapes for you. Sketch them in. Oop, oop. All right, we just sketch them in. Not get too precious. Oh no, get precious. Okay, that's good enough. Is that right? Boop, 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 boop. No, that's wrong. So this should be more like. What am I doing? I'm trying to draw a shape. Suddenly I'm doing a thing on forms. I'm getting too precious with it. So, do a couple of these. Slapping in some shapes. Slap, slap, slap. Okay. All right. Let's do 4 different types of cast light here to really think about how this is going to work. All right. Get some space here. So in our first one, I'm going to do a real simple from the left, right? So like this, right? You see these little arrows sometimes where we're saying that's where the light's coming from. So that suggests our light source is kind of in front of our objects, and we're kind of getting this. These lights are coming in like this at our objects, right? That means these hot spots, this is going to be where all the light is, right? So we're going to get like big planes here and here. And see here, this first one, this cube, these 2 planes are not going to be, they're not going to get the complete heat of the light, right? So like this pyramid is going to get a 10 on it, right? Because it's facing right at it. And so we think about our, I'll zoom in. Think about our circle, like we get a 10 for light here, and then we get a 9, 8, 7 as it goes out. Right? Makes sense so far? And it's going to just kind of dissipate as we hit it. Now this cube here, because it's not, you know, perpendicular to our light, it's actually a little away. You're going to see this maybe get like a 7 or an 8, right? 7 or an 8, give or take. They're going to be pretty similar hues. Or values, I should say, more accurately. And these other places, like here, we'll get the shade because they are away from our light. So let's block in our shade, right? Right? And then our light, something like this. We're just doing really basic values here. I don't want to get too precious with you. Too particular, I don't want to freak you out too much. Right, that's how you'd like that one. But wait, what about cast shadow? Well, it's going to put... So cast shadow is pretty simple, right? If there's an object in the way, shadow falls behind it. So we know that our light is coming in this way. Right? It's coming in, it's coming in, it's coming in. That means behind this sphere, there should be a cast shadow. So we're going to just drop that in. Right? And it's going to do something like that, probably. Same thing. This cube is going to be something like this. Cast shadow. And when you're doing cast shadows, you don't have to be super accurate. You just have to kind of get the gist of it. Right? Because shade can be a little... unpredictable sometimes because there's a lot of like bounce light and other diffuse lights coming in effective. And so if you're not like perfect with your cast shadow, doesn't matter much. Like really hard cast shadows only happen under really strong, crisp light. Most of the time cast shadows are kind of diffused because there's, like I said, all kinds of things in the way between where that light hits that object and where that shadow shows up. Like there's water in the atmosphere that messes up how light is actually working. Like lighting is so messed up that all the water in the air, depending where you are, will change how that light behaves in the air, because all that water will reflect things around, so it'll diffuse the light. So atmosphere is just sort of a whole other piece you got to think about. I have the light on the pyramid. Make the shadow from the circle lighter with it. Yes, so that's bounce light, and that is something I wanted to avoid it, but we should talk about. So it is true. So all of these surfaces will also radiate light back out, right, in their own way, in a weaker version, right? They all use a different color for bounce light. Let's use purple. Oh, let's use red, right? Primary. So we have bounce light coming out, right? This is our bounce. Right, all of this bounce off. And remember, it's not like the light hits a surface and it goes right back out. It does this kind of, in the same way we saw the light bulb radiate out light, this kind of turns into its small little light source, right? And remember, the strength of the light is determined by how strong the light source is, right? So bounce light is usually a very weak light source, but how strong bounce light is determined by how strong the light source is, right? So if you got 10s coming in, right? You know, it's a big, beautiful, bright day, and we got 10 just rocketing in. The bounce light's going to be pretty strong, right? If it's just kind of a normal cloudy or you're indoors, like this might be 7, 6, you know, a bunch of 5s or whatever. So your bounce light's not very strong, right? You got like 1s and 2s and 3s bouncing off, right? That sort of math makes sense. So if this is super crisp light coming in, bang, 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 it's a hot ass Arizona day. Pardon my language. You're gonna probably get like 5 on here, right? You're gonna get something like that, right? And you might get a little bit like, you know, a little here off that thing, right? Maybe a little right there. You see all those? And that's just following the logic of the light comes down and comes out, right? Light comes in, bounces, radiates out. And so, see all that? Like a laser beam. And if you want, you can diffuse the light, like the shadow. You can kind of give a little bit of an edge here, right? That's totally cool if you want. It really depends on what your day is up to. We all following so far? I want to dive into some more shapes. We're getting some aha for lighting. Try our next one. Right. We're getting some big woo for lighting. What if we did one from slightly back, right? So we're coming in this way. This is, the light is slightly behind, right? Here's our sun. Bang, 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 slightly behind. So what's our shade going to do? Think about our objects, right? So we're going to have shade here. This is behind, right? A little bit of a cast shadow. Same thing here. Now, big brain time. Let's think about this plane right here. Is that catching the light at all? Is it perpendicular, parallel? What would that be doing? Yeah, it's not facing it. So we're going to have most of this object in shade. And now I should say in this moment that your shade will actually, it has its own planar rules. Remember last week when I talked about how you should separate your objects into light and darks as regions, and then within those you can change the intensity of the value. Do you remember that? That happens with your shade too. So while you might initially think, okay, this whole thing should be in shade. Well, see, the thing is, there's light over here, right? Bounce light. There's light that's catching over here, and that's going to send a little bit of light over this way. That means that this side of the pyramid is probably going to be a little lighter. See how that works, right? So this shouldn't actually be the same shade as the piece next to it. So we should actually make that just a hair lighter, right? So you get that slight change. And that's, to your point, Rob, what would happen. Right, get your pyramid cast shadow in there. And then we know that this part of the cube is completely shaded. There's going to be a cast shadow. Remember to just follow the lines. Okay, so we're going to get something like this. Right. And then there's going to be this light here. And then something to think about on your objects is you're going to get a little bit of light on the side of the pyramid here as the edge catches, right? Because you remember how the most intense points tend to get these like little specular highlights, right? So the top of the pyramid is going to have a little one, little corner here is going to have a little one, right? So like these edges usually catch a lot of light. Right, now you wouldn't do white. This is just to get the idea across. We got a shade in our cube here. So again, the top of the cube has probably about would probably be about a 6, maybe a 5, something like that, right? And as I color on the top of this cube, I want you to take another thought here. Because this is the process. The general process is how strong is my light? That determines what my surface does. So if this is a really strong light here, again, this would be the same value across it. But this is a very weak light source, like a little itty bitty light bulb, and it's just trying to put some light out. I'm trying. This would be a gradient, right? You wouldn't have the same value across it. You would actually have something more like that, right? Make sense? Yep. So it all comes back to how big is my light source, right? That's the big one. If you look around you right now, you're inside. Inside doesn't usually have a very strong source of light. You're going to see these gradients and diffuse shadows all over the place. Right? Like if we come back to our friend over here, same thing if this is a weaker light source, you're going to see something like me clicking on the wrong layer. That's what you're going to see. Right? You're going to see something like this because it's a weaker light source. And because it's a weaker light source, this bounce light will not be as strong, right? So that's, I'll give you an idea, right? That's how that would work. Click, 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 undo, undo. So let's say this is not a weak light source. We're going to choose a nice crisp light source. Dun, dun. So, and then this one probably gets like a something like that. That should be a little bit brighter. That's too dark. That's too dark. Yeah, that feels better. And depending on the size of this pyramid, you might get a little bit of shadow on the cube, actually, like that. Depending. Like if it's a big pyramid, you might get something like this. Depends. Yeah, light is a lot of thought for sure. Maybe let's put a little bit of pyramid light in there. Yeah, that looks cool. Even though it probably wouldn't. Let's do another one. This is fun, right? You guys coloring along? Right? You're coloring along, right? Yeah, with practice, this isn't so crazy. Let's try oh, here's a fun one. Let's say the light is coming directly from the front, right? Like the light is emanating from your face towards the screen. Fix my tablet calibration. Okay, so what's that mean? If we're doing this, that means where's our 10s? There's our hot light. This one, that's not quite right on. It's probably like an 8. This one might be about a 6. Let's say a 5. And nice. Here's our little 10 at the corner here, and this whole cube's gonna be nice and lit up. So this one's probably like, I don't know, 8, 7. It's probably more like a. No, I guess if that'd be about an 8, 8. Pretty similar across the board, right? So color, color, color. Right. Gotta be shapes. Because the light's coming right at it, you're not going to see much shadow because the shadow is not actually in view. It's there, you just can't see it because you're looking right at the objects. Oop. Dang it, Zot! Right. Now, you put a little bit of shade maybe on the, you get some cast shadow off this ball here. Right, even though most of it's going to be pretty much in the light, because right on front of it. Right, not right on front. Right? Maybe we'll put a little bit of cast shadow so there's something happening. They're straight on. My brain's coloring, so I like to hear. Let's do one. So we did one from the back there. Let's do one from the. Oh, from the right. Duh. Got one from the front, one from the side, one from the back there. Or do you feel like this is kind of comprehensive? Do you want me to do a different angle, or you kind of getting it? Oh, well, I'll see what I'll mention this here. So because there's this light coming in, this surface that we don't see on the cube here is going to put out that bounce light. So on this part of the pyramid, you get just a little bit of bounce light. Like that. You might even get some on the cube here. Because it's going to come out like that. Might get a little bit right here. Might get a little boop. That's way too hot. Do we need another angle, or we feeling it? Want to dive into the next part? Everyone follow along so far? We kind of get the basics here? Good. Okay, so we're doing this last one. You there, fourth example. Get out. I hate you. I hate you. You're not my real dad. Okay, so diving into the next part. Let's talk about some shape basics. I don't know you, that's my purse. Oh, hey, Aika. I see someone else showed up. Where was I talking about here? All right, shape basics. So, forms come in a lot of different forms, right? You can have them, and this is something you should practice, right? You can have them doing all kinds of crazy things where maybe like, you know, like a freaking macaroni noodle, right? Or, you know, kind of crazy Jenga piece. Not Jenga. Jenga's actually pretty, but right. Forms can come in all kinds of crazy shapes. Or maybe this is square here, but then suddenly it's round, right? So there's no like actual set amount of forms. There are some general shapes that tend to exist consistently. So you got your first one, which is this is the shape basics. I'm sure you've done these drills before if you've taken any like rec art class. I used to take these and it was just like, okay, color in a cylinder, Billy. Right? You got cylinders, you got cubes, rectangle kind of shapes, you have pyramid shapes. You got circles, and then that's really the basics, right? Now, what's really happening here is not that you have four shapes. There's really just two. There's one which is round, and two what I would call planar, or flat surfaces, right? If you look at these ones, here I'll mark this. Let's say red. Let's use different colors. Let's say green and purple, right? Where's the flat ones? Well, this is flat, 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 flat. And then where's your round? Round, round. And what's happening here is there's just those two behaviors we talked about last week. I'll do a little reminder here for you. When a surface is flat, it follows that kind of degree function I mentioned before, where what's the angle of it relative to the light? That dictates how strong the light source is against the surface, right? And when it's round, it dissipates, right? It goes 10, 9, 8, 7, and it just fades off, right? Flat there, I guess you have like a 10, 9, 8, 7, right? Kind of like that. That makes sense? Change in planes. So even though you're going to hear, or whenever you like, there'll be some like Instagram hack image where it's going to tell you how to shade your shapes, and it shows you a cylinder, a cube, a pyramid, and a sphere. This is slightly misleading because this kind of gives the impression when you're newer to art that there's only these shapes. But I dare you to go look at a teapot and tell me exactly what's going on. Especially like it's like, a teapot with a bunch of filigree on it. It's like, well, that's not a sphere, right? So I want you to start thinking about either round surfaces or planar/flat surfaces, because that's how the world really kind of works, right? And that's how you get really good at light, is you just understand these differences. So anytime you want to light, like, a cylinder, which has both, if I'm going to light the top of this thing, and I'm going to light this cylinder, I'm going to light it all right. These are the different colors here. This one on the top is going to have some kind of consistent value, unless, of course, the light source isn't very strong and it has to dissipate. So let's say our light source is just coming from the side. Maybe this catches like 60% opacity, right? Easy. Well, I'll draw on the lights. See what I'm doing. Right, so the light's just coming in. Sorry, from the classic, slightly from the front version. Jeez, is that little arrow? It's terrible. And so what do we do with the round part? Well, remember, because it's round, it dissipates away from the light source. So there it is, colored in. We want it to dissipate, so we have to do this little bit of shade here, right? That's it. Now, of course, I know somebody thinking, but what about the bounce light? What about it? Well, you have a little bit of like bounce light here, right? Some backlight, whatever that might be. And that's really it. And just to make sure I just absolutely just bury this in your heads forever. This one's a flat surface. Light's coming in. At the angle, it's going to get maybe like a 50 to 60%. Maybe 4. Let's just say 5. And this one here, you're going to get that big part, and then it just dissipates outward. Right? And zoom in. Here's a 9, here's an 8, here's a 7, and it just dissipates. Right? That's how that works. Super clear. We feeling super pumped on shapes. We get that light. We can dive into some characters. We getting some light bulbs, pun intended. We feeling like some clarity on light that wasn't there before. Another pun. Or is clarity actually? Kind of whatever. Do we feel illuminated? Well, one thing that just occurred to me I should mention is different surfaces are more or less reflective when you think about bounce light. I don't want to get too into that because that's huge. Because, a piece of glass, shiny plate armor, highly reflective surfaces, right? And so there's a lot of bounce light. They really send off a lot of bounce light, whereas a piece of leather, like dull leather, sends off very little light. So bounce light is not consistent. It will depend on the surface, right? That part, I can't really tell you all of it. You have to go do kind of your own visual library studies because there's so many surfaces that I can't cover it in a in a single lecture here. Well, it depends on the metal, right? So plate armor, because I know some people here like to draw characters with armor, is actually very reflective in real life. Movies tend to give a kind of messed up conception of plate armor because if you had actual plate armor that was as reflective as it truly is, you would just see cameras in every extra's breastplate because it'd be showing the camera. And so media intentionally dulls armor so that they can actually shoot the scene without giving away the whole crew, right? But to that same effect, sometimes metal is very non-reflective, right? Like something like bronze can be very non-reflective. So it really depends. If you're not sure what the metal's doing, just do your own kind of detective work upstairs. Like, okay, if this is like a really polished piece of steel and they're in a nice piece of armor, it's going to be very reflective and it's going to actually, mirror the environment around it instead of just reflecting the bounce light. So if you're not really sure, I highly recommend just go find an example of that type of material and then just do the study that way. And just know that different surfaces return light differently, right? You just got to understand why is he stumbling? Because there are so many different surfaces that all behave slightly differently because reality is kind of complicated, which is why, we got to talk about light in lectures in depth like this. So with that, I think we're probably good to dive into some characters. Let's put some white on here. I grab some of my own here, just to because you guys have the shade templates. So if you want to go still look at the shade templates and make some sense of it, got pieces here. Oop. So. And hey, why wouldn't I use my own official Bro Satsu materials? Yes, I thought I'd start with the buff one. Let's start with this. Let's start with the this one. It's probably a little easier than the buff one. I want to freak you guys out. This one's got some nice cast shadow to it. So. You gotta ask yourself. Ask yourself, ask your friends, ask your neighbors. Let's do the big bold one like this too. Where's that light coming from? Where did old Satsu shade it from? It's from the back, right? It's actually, no, it's not from the back. It's actually kind of from the top. I did top down. It's actually kind of like this. Sorry. I noticed the side of her face had shade and went, wait a second. This was like this. You did it wrong. Her neck, it's wrong. Let's think about this logically, right? You remember? Yeah, it's from the top left. So if we look at our... remember the light source that comes in, you have surfaces, and then you'll get these kinds of... Right? It casts the shadow like this. It's cast shadow. Depends on the light. If it's a strong light, it's more like this. If it's a weak light, you'll see more radiation like that, right? That makes sense? So, why am I talking about that? Talking about her neck, right? So you got to remember that a neck sticks out, right? Here's a nose, some pretty lips, and a chin. There's a space under the chin, right? The chin's going to cast shade. And so here we're going to see a little bit of shade cast, right? Now you're not going to like color in here because there's no surface there, but then this gets colored in, right? That's that logic there. Okay. Let's think about her face, right? And now something to add in here when you're like, I don't really know how to shade faces. You have to understand the planes of the object you're shading. So if you're like, I don't know how to shade a face, well, then you have to go study faces, understand that like you have a brow, and then there's like an eyebrow, and then it goes in, and there's this, right? There's all these little pieces here to a face, and they all kind of work like either a plane or a round surface. Human faces are quite round, but even round objects have different let's say surface relativity to the light source, which is like the dumbest way I could say that, but I hope that makes sense. Right? So for instance, you can see here on this one, this socket, like this orbital area, it goes in on the human body, right? So it would get covered in shade, right? And then the top of the head is a round object, and so you just think of this like a round object. This part gets shade, right? Like that. And we know that the cheek, see right here, it tends to kind of point up a bit. So sometimes it catches some light. That's why I did that. Right? There's a little bump under the lip, right? So they're like lips, or they stick out a bit. So there's some shade under them usually. Top of the lip faces down, so there's some shade on that, right? So we have a little bit of shade on the lip. Right? So there's the face. And then, of course, the nose casts some shadow if you want to get like really into it. Because the nose sticks out, and then it casts shadow. Right? The bottom of the nose casts shadow. I would recommend whatever head helps you understand the head. Because, I have a bit of a pet peeve about this, honestly. I picked it up in university when I was taking psychology and then some philosophy classes as breadth for my business stuff. And one of the things I noticed is people in the social sciences love to just create all of their own jargon for otherwise very simple concepts. Everyone's just trying to put their egotistical brand on the world. And as a student, I didn't appreciate it because it felt kind of confusing, potentially. It's just, there's like a dozen different ways to understand the human head. It's not like doing that is wrong. It's just find a way that makes sense for you. Everyone is different. One way is not the universal way to understand the human body. So just find a method that works for you, right? If you like that particular head, awesome. Rock and roll, do that, study it till you're blue in the face. But I'm not going to recommend a specific head to anybody because I understand people all learn differently. Like when I learned the head, I didn't actually use any specific artist's head. I just studied the face a lot, and it just sort of made sense to me over time. Right? And one of the, well, the head's a good learning tool. Not going too much of a tangent here. I personally found a lot of those models to be ultimately limiting because when you try and do like a live study, the problem is you're going to try and apply that framework that artist gave you for the head to this head you're studying. But human beings are a little random and they don't all make sense compared to this universal framework. And I know I kind of say there's like there's a very universal component to human bodies. There's also like this big random component where people have all kinds of different sizes and lumps and planes and shapes. And so I'm not saying don't do it. Just when you pick a head, only use the head if it makes you better at drawing faces. Don't just use it because artists are like, this is the head, right? Always remember what you're trying to do. You're trying to get good at drawing faces. So that should motivate the tools you pick for your artist tool belt. Does that make sense, or did I go on too much of a tangent? And what's this here from Bobby? Yeah, this kind of stuff is fine. I would almost recommend this sort of reference rather than like picking a very specific style of coloring in heads. Though I would recommend even more, go study real human beings. Go into the bathroom with a flashlight, turn off the bathroom light, turn on your flashlight, and then just play with the angles around your face. Like, you have a face, study it. Just look at it. Like, see how the light behaves around your nose and your cheeks and your eyes. And you'll probably learn more from 10 minutes screwing around in the bathroom with a flashlight than any of these special heads and faces and reference sheets. Right? Anyways, long-winded tangent aside, back to shading the face. Where was I? I got so off track here. That's okay. Okay. I'm gonna color this pose in with more shade than I normally would because we're really studying here. So what's a booby? It's a round object, which we're working our way through here. Color it in. Same thing, round object. Color it in, color it in, color it in. Remember, just think of these as shapes. That's all you're doing. Boobs are kind of round, so you're gonna get that light on top and that shade in behind. Boobs are round. Yeah, there you go. Just take forever in the bathroom. When the wife's like, what the hell are you doing? It's like, I'm studying my face, babe. Arms, cylinders, right? So the back here, shade it in. Shoulders are kind of round, so give it one of these. And then hopefully by now you can kind of start to see like the logic starts to move really quickly, right? See that? Do you see it? Right. Now we got a cast shadow thing, right? Fingers would create cast shadow, so there's shade under the hand. You can even do a little bit of shadow from the person here. Right? The knees would have a little bit of cast shadow. Under this hand would be some cast shadow. You could fancy and do a little bit of like, let's see, this would probably be like that, maybe. Where the fingers leave a little bit of light in between. And here's a fun part. These puppies would have their own cast shadow. And that's why her whole torso is in shade here. Because her upper body is actually creating a block to the light source. Right? That's why all this is shaded in. Plus it just looks kind of fancy. Right? So all this gets blocked in. I did, like, in my example, I did a very anime style where you kind of like do a sort of lazy half-half thing. But if this was a real shading person, you would see this like big set of cast light coming in. Remember, the thigh is a cylinder, so this is all like that. And this is actually right here, you see a great chance to mix some elements. So here, let's do it this way. So you have to think now, how do I shade this thigh? Well, right here, we know this is a cylinder, so this part's going to come in pretty easy. That's easy, right? But now we have to think about cast shadow. Her top body is putting in a cast shadow. So we're going to see something like this here, and the thigh itself will have a cast shadow on the shin, right? And so these are all shade, but you get this mix of objects casting their own shadow, as well as being in shadow because they're facing away from the light. Right? So that's what we have to think about. How do these things mix? Oop. My blue. And this arm here would have a bit of shadow, so you probably something kind of like that. Honestly, she'd probably actually cast more. You'd probably something more like this, and then there's the shade of the woman. Right? So if you were to like do this in all proper, you'd probably be something more like this. Right? Makes sense? Even actually, yeah, her head would have some shadow too, so you'd see something like this, right? To do it real proper, real life kind of stuff, you'd probably see something more like this. It should be pretty, right? I'm just trying to get into work mode. Careful. We'll just stop. We'll stop. 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 I'm slipping into it. Right, and then over here on the right, you can see a simplified version if you want to do like a more cartoony anime thing. You can see I left her thigh open because we want to see that thigh, right? And over here is a more realistic version where you think about the actual shapes themselves. You can see that the one on the left, as I zoom out, feels a little more real, doesn't it? Like you might actually see light do that, whereas the one on the right, not quite. You see that? Let's do another one. Of course you see it. You're smart. Oh, that's the cast shadow one. Sorry, the ambient shadow. So let's do a little thinking through our big bulky girl. Right, this one here. You can see just good old-fashioned top-down light. So where's our light source? Our light source coming straight down. Right, this is ambient, nice, warm. I'm outside flexing Miami light. I just saw Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's in his prime. He's not a governor yet. He barely speaks English. Movies, he's never seen one. So, let's do a process here. I just do my character. I want a shader. Pick wherever you want and start thinking about it. You just, you can work your way down. You can work your way up. Doesn't matter. I usually start from up top. So, chin catches some light. All right. Lines. Right. And here's where you can start to think about the actual, let's call them the interior planes of objects. Because like this neck, remember you're all here for advanced anatomy, so like there's this part that bulges out, and then we have a bulge here, and then a bulge here, and all you're doing is thinking about these like these planes that exist, right? Every one of these is like a cylinder when you're coloring things, right? The cylinder. Knuckles are like little spheres, right? All of these just catch different amounts of light relative to how much muscle you're showing. So like, right? Does it make sense? Like you just follow the logic of the plane, right? It'll tell you, like all of these are their own little areas. It'll tell you what gets light, what doesn't. Just think of a bunch of little cylinders. The body is really a bunch of cylinders. very round. Bodies are pretty round, even on like super jacked people, like your abs. These little sections. Kind of a cool looking image, isn't it? Right? So when I come in to light this, right? So I know there's a bottom light. Let's think about this shoulder here. There's an area here on the bottom of this shoulder, right? This is the bottom of the object. And then also over here. See that? Just turn off the preciousness of the human body and just treat it like an object in space. Right? So this is a cylinder. There's shade on the bottom of the cylinder. You can put a little shade here if you want. Make that a little bigger, brighter. There'll be some cast shadow from this shoulder, because you can think of this like a big sphere or a big roundish hot doggy cylinder just sitting over that shoulder, so there'll be some cast shadow here. See that? And light is really just, if you just kind of take your time and walk through it. Right? So there'll be a little bit of shadow on the bottom of this thing. A little bit of shadow on the bottom of this one. This one would mostly get shadow. It's the bottom of the major cylinder. And that's something I should mention. Even though you have these like interior objects, these interior shapes, cylinders, there's still the overall master shape. And so at the same time that there's these little cylinders, right, all stacked against each other like muscles, overall it's its big master cylinder. Make sense? So if I were to actually draw this out as something more nuanced and less sloppy, you would see something more like these half cylinders, right, where they're all just kind of doing this. Right? Makes sense? Like a piece of licorice. The body is licorice. So we go to the boobies, right? There's a bottom, it's a sphere. There's a side of the pec, it's a plane. The boobs cast some light. We'll just kind of do a quick pass here, right? We don't want to get too precious. That's the Satsu. Don't get too precious. There's lots of ways to do this. You can do the big part of the master object and then do the smaller parts as you work it out, right? Nice and quick. This arm has shade on the bottom. I have to stop flipping to work mode. Anyways, you get the idea, right? Just start. Yeah, it's like, oh no, the contract's due. Go, buddy, go. I'll just, nope, stop. Fight it. Fight the urge to color. Must render shade. Yeah, all right. Now that really is the idea of how you approach coloring more complex shades, or sorry, shapes. How you shade shapes, not shape shades. How are we all feeling about that? Are we feeling confident? Do we need another example? The body is licorice. If you want, I had this one here with some cast light. That one's blocked light, if you want me to go over that. Or do you feel like you kind of have enough to work with here? Nothing. Nothing. The chat's absolutely silent. I'm going to assume you know what happened, that you know everything then. You're good? Okay. Cool. Well, let's call it there for light. I think we have more than enough to think about. There's a lot of content there to parse through. Good. Good. Right. If I open this up, you probably get the idea, right? The crystal ball is not a very bright object, so it's just giving this nice ambient. It's actually a good example of that weaker light I was talking about. You can see how like it hits her face a little bit. It hits her upper chest. It hits her lower abdomen, the undersides of her arms. Right? You guys get it. You're smart. Okay, that's enough for light 2. Let's dive into the Q&A.